Huh?
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, featuring your hosts, Taylor Field and Ruben Olson.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Clues, Campfire Clues. I am your host, Taylor, and today I decided to kind of continue on this trend of newspaper sightings and encounters. Ever since a few episodes ago, I did the newspaper Bigfoot. I thought, there's a lot of interesting history attached to these clippings that are posted out there, especially when you look in the dated ones going like 1700s, 1800s, 1900s. There's a whole archive of information. And there's, of course, not all newspapers are real, and some you got to take with a grain of salt. So today I spent hours looking through different newspaper articles, specifically in relation to Dogman and werewolf accounts, and just managed to see what I could source and find. And I've compiled a couple of ones. And it wasn't easy. I'm not gonna lie. There's a lot of articles that just kind of defer to Bigfoot or just talk about, hey, this happened, the other day, in the present day. This happened in Michigan. Michigan Dogman seemed to be a very prominent result upon my research in this. But to find these specific articles, you really got to dig. You got to look into the keywords. You got to find these sources, and then you got to proof them and think, okay, what kind of credibility is this? Is this one of those just kind of make-believe newspapers? Is this just sourced from some movie or something like that? Who knows? But anyways, so Dogman, if you want to know a little bit more about this cryptid, me and Ruben actually did an introduction to Dogman, where we give our initial thoughts and just kind of talk about it and kind of figure out like a little bit of a starting ground foundation of this cryptid, and it just opens the door to many more discussions that me and Ruben are going to be having. But before I get into some of these newspaper clippings, just got a couple of plugs I'm just going to shout out. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca, and you can also find us on social media. Cryptid Clues on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Additionally, you can send us an email. If you have any sightings, encounters, just want to say hi or chat, send us an email at CryptidClues@gmail.com. Additionally, we also have ad-free early episodes that are available on our Patreon. And that's basically it. So to kickstart the first of these newspaper clippings, I have one here dubbed Tales About Hawaii. Now again, these aren't all meant to be accurate 100% proof or anything like that. I mean, it's cryptids. I mean, that's something that is not really concrete, to be honest, but it's all about shedding the light on this fascinating topic of conversation. So, Hawaii High Chief kills the cannibal Dogman. Dogman legend number 5. In the few minutes that elapsed between the awakening of Kaup, the cannibal Dogman, and the time it took for the dog to get the scent of the escape route of the High Chief of Hawaii and his son, the father remembered the prayers which would overcome the Dogman. In the short interval, the High Chief was prostrated with fear and did not remember to pray. As soon as he began his prayers, the gods helped him. His senses became acute and he was able to think. Hiding place. Knowing that the swift-moving dog would soon overtake him and his son, the High Chief looked for a hiding place, and he prayed, Oku Olono Okain O Kanaloa. By the power of the gods, by the strength of this prayer, save us too, save us too. The High Chief noticed a great stone lying in Moanalua, Quickly, he and the boy hid under the stone and were able to hear the rush of wind as the dogman sped by them on the way to the beach at Cuillin. Peeking out from under their stone, father and son watched the dog reach the beach, leap into the air, and fly toward the big island, apparently to hunt them. The two trudged wearily to Cuillin at the foot of Pacific Heights. There they were welcomed by the high priest Cuillin. Father and son thanked the priest for their escape and acknowledged that it was the prayers of Cuillin that had taught the father which saved them. Cannibal is killed. Cuillin now placed full trust in the father. He taught him more prayers and sent him back to his home island to kill the dogman, assuring him of success if he would but remember to call upon the gods at all times. This the high chief did. Assured of success, he organized a group of men, tracked down the dogman. They finally killed Cope. At least they thought they did. The ghost of Cope was not dead. It sped to the upper portion of Nuanu Valley, where it may be seen today as a big or small dog in the clouds which hung over the valley. Cuillin, his real destroyer, became famous as the head of the clan of priests who worshipped the Mukapua. He taught men how to get along with the Kapua so that the lizard would bring them health and happiness. That is the legend here, and I just think it's fascinating that we have a Hawaiian legend associated with dogmen. That blew my mind. I mean, I've been to Hawaii. I never would have ever guessed or speculated any kind of, at least a cryptid of dogman associated with any kind of history or legend with these Hawaiian islands. I think it's just fascinating. So when I found this, I wanted to just share it. I think it's incredible. Continuing on from there, I have another one, and this is more along the lines of werewolf. It's a very, very old tale, I will say. It's more so than, an actual encounter. But it's a tale that was kind of been prominently brought up, and it was really tricky. Like the writing in some of these old texts are so hard to kind of decipher sometimes, but I looked through and I think I figured out and translated what I mostly, for the most part, could. So it's called The Werewolf. In 1558, a lady was burned on the charge of being a werewolf, the evidence against her being considered conclusive. It seemed that a gentleman visiting at her husband's chateau had gone out one morning to go hunting. "Mind you bring me what you take," said the husband. At nightfall, the guest returned, weary and footsore. His sport had been very poor, and all he had seen was a large wolf which attacked him, and after a desperate struggle, he managed to sever one of its forepaws. Upon having returned back and meeting with his friend, he mentioned, "I have this forepaw here in my bag." The inquiring host peered in as the bag was opened and found that it contained a little white hand. However, its fingers were covered with rings. Recognizing one of the gems, the husband, along with his friend, descended to the kitchen and there found the lady of the house with one hand cut off. This hand was produced at her trial, and in a few days more, the woman was a heap of ashes. Now, this one I found intriguing just because it's a tale. I always find it very dark and depressing how this is not limited to it's part of stories, but it's not limited to a make-believe or anything like that. Like, this was a dark part of human history that I don't think they really teach, and I don't want to say enforce, but alert people like, hey, we were a very dark race of humans and species where we used to treat people like this, especially women. Like, what was the real crime that was committed here? Why was it kind of used in association with a werewolf story? I'm not disregarding the fact that maybe he was genuinely attacked by something, but I just think it's crazy that it ended up with this woman who was burned at the stake. It's crazy that that is a real thing that has happened, where women would be suspected of being a witch and would be burned for it. And I'm not saying, back in those days, men and women both sometimes didn't partake in some very satanic things, because to this day, people of all different aspects and parts of the world engage in some very satanic rituals, and it's terrifying and terrible. But how many people were wrongly convicted on such frivolous counts of irrelevant evidence, just sneaking suspicions? So when you're looking at a situation like this in this tale, like, it's a fascinating tale, but I just have to wonder, what was the real cause here? Why did she genuinely had her hand severed, coincidentally with this dog wolf that attacked this man's friend? The forepaw was severed. In this aspect, like, all you see is, okay, the woman's hand is in this bag. The only real mention of the werewolf comes from this friend. So what's the connection? Could it be, I don't know, even like, we're getting full detective mode here, but like, maybe the woman was having an affair or something, and the man got angry and cut her hand off, and she went back home, and he made up some crazy story to have her convicted. Like, it could have been anything, because the justice system back then was just atrocious. I mean, you can call it a justice system because there's no justice being dealt. But I just had to talk about this story because I thought, okay, we have accounts of people claiming they see werewolves going back to, again, the 1500s here. And if you look into the introduction episode to Dogman, me and Ruben talk about it, I mean, Dogman goes back way before the 1500s. But just to see this kind of a tale written on paper, I just thought it would be a fascinating thing just to share. And with that, I'm gonna not go to be more detective than that. So I got a couple more encounters that I'm gonna dive into here, but we're just gonna jump to a quick ad break, and we'll be right back. And we're back. So my next one that I have for you is the Cherry Hill Werewolf. And again, I know I keep mentioning werewolf, but note that I'm not using that as like, oh, it's always just this tale of this person being bit and changing and everything like that. I was using it as a way to more or less keyword my way to victory. There would be a lot of people that would log their encounters and experiences as being a werewolf, because the term dogman didn't exist back then. You look at the different words, and this is something I talked with Ruben on a previous episode, where you have to put your mind in these different periods of time and think about the keywords that they would be using. Werewolf is a prominent one. Dogman is a much more modern term, and you have to think, lichens and lycanthropy, different things like that would have been familiar. And it's the same for when people are around the world. The Mogollon monster, the skunk ape, the Yeren, the Yeti. I mean, the list just goes on of all these different terms, and it just goes to show, okay, if you're trying to look for something, play around with the different terminology, because you'll start to open up a whole new archive of information that's available. But without further ado, the Cherry Hill Werewolf. Creature or prankster frightened many. This was written by an individual called Walter B. Metz. The old hillside schoolhouse, built in 1880, stood at the base of Cherry Hill, now Park Hill, at what is now about 29th Street and Percy Mackin Drive. An old dirt road suitable for horse-drawn vehicles followed the base of Cherry Hill eastward to the so-called German Park. There is another dirt road extending north from the end of Newton Avenue, now Main Street, at 22nd Street to the park. Today, the German Park is located across the street north from the Days Inn Motel and is still being used as a park. It was popular during the years 1900 to 1920 as a site for Sunday school picnics and other church activities. There was a seldom used trail leading down the park from the top of Cherry Hill. This path was later improved by the installation of concrete stair steps to accommodate several families living on top of the hill and beyond. Several people reported having seen a strange-looking person who came down the path from time to time and crossed the park. He was described as having an animal-type walk and animal-like teeth with fangs protruding from each side of his mouth. This, together with long uncut hair and beard, added to his animal-like appearance. This creature was referred to as the Werewolf of Cherry Hill. He was credited with having the powers of witchcraft. Several people claimed to have seen this creature enter the swamps of Dark Hollow, but no one had ever seen him come out. One boy was out in Dark Hollow fishing in a small stream when he reportedly saw this witch coming into the swamp. The boy hid behind some bushes because he said he didn't want to be changed into a frog or something. Adding to the mystery of the situation was the fact that there had been several unsolved murders of teenage girls in the area to the north and west of Cherry Hill. Two of whom were Florence Chilcutt, age 18, in 1902, and Joanna Hess, age 16, in 1918. Both had been brutally murdered and dismembered in the same manner, indicating to some that the murders were committed by the same madman. The werewolf was said to skirt around the edge of the park when a large number of people were present and not come near them. Groups from 2 to 6 young people apparently did not give him pause because he was said to have ambled along quite near them. There would sometimes be loud screams as frightened boys and girls jumped up and ran for their lives. I never did see this werewolf, but I have talked with people who said they had seen it. One was a neighbor of ours, John Gordon. He did not believe this character was a werewolf or a witch as many believed. In his opinion, this was a person with a perverted sense of humor, conscious of his scary appearance and knowing his reputation in the community. He merely dressed and acted the part, taking delight in scaring the daylights out of people. I have talked with several people during the past few years who say they actually saw the werewolf or whose parents supposedly had seen him. No one knew where he came from or where he went, and no one actually wanted to know badly enough to follow and find out. This one was written November 8th, 1979. So again, I found this to be very interesting. Again, a little bit of an association with the witchcraft, as I mentioned in that previous tale. But again, people just seeing this thing kind of stumbling and lurking about with a little bit of an animal physical appearance and even step to it and the way it moves around. So I thought this was fascinating, and I liked a little bit of the kind of counter approach with this man thinking, it's just a sick sense of humor. This guy's just taking advantage. But again, you have to think costume wise, probably much more like a lot in the term of prosthetics back then. Like if someone was trying to fool you, they probably get like a real wolf's head, put it on, and you get a full fur coat kind of type deal. It'll probably be pretty convincing actually. But there's a lot of things to take into account. And I know I've talked to Ruben about this, and we're going to do a deep dive into some people and how you would basically try and analyze footage and how you can tell when something looks more real than something compared to being, in a suit or something along those lines. But I digress. So the next encounter that I have here, this takes place in Toledo, Ohio. This one's a little bit more recent now, going into 1972. So around the time period the last article was written, actually. But this is over 2 days, a Wednesday and a Thursday, August 9th. We're going to start off with the Toledoan cries werewolf, but police disagree. Werewolves in Toledo? Toledoan John Simansko, 22, of 1118 Warwick Ave, says that he saw what looked like a werewolf as he was driving on Sylvania Avenue toward Talmadge Road about 11 p.m. Monday. The University of Toledo pharmacy students said that the form darting in front of his car appeared to be human with an oversized wolf-like head and an elongated nose. He called police, but the operator dismissed the werewolf as a joke. If indeed he did see a werewolf, the beast must have driven here from Defiance, where last week 3 persons said they saw a hairy creature roaming near the downtown district. Next thing you know, someone will be saying they saw a werewolf behind the wheel of a flying saucer. Thursday, August 10th. Folks still see monster. Police unable to find werewolf. The werewolf craze is on. Ohio residents are claiming to see the big hairy monsters all over the state. Despite reports from policemen that nothing is to be found in the areas, the latest monster was reportedly sighted by a woman motorist in northern Wyandotte County Wednesday. Sheriff's deputies checked for the big black thing she said that she saw, but had no luck locating the monster. The same goes for Defiance Police, who said they have heard no more reports of the famed werewolf who appeared before 2 Toledo railroad workers there last week. And Toledo police are dismissing reports from University of Toledo student who said he saw one on Sylvania Avenue near Talmadge Road earlier this week. The craze was started last month when a 7-foot monster which smelled like Limburger cheese was reportedly seen in Marion County. This I find very interesting because this goes hand in hand with the report in Defiance that me and Ruben talked about. That was one of the reports that I actually had highlighted in the introductory to Dogman episode when we were discussing it. So again, here's another side of the story where people are just starting to see this cryptid pop up more frequently. And again, you have to realize too, when a couple people start seeing something, a bunch more people are going to ride the hype train, you could call it, of like, oh, I saw something too, yeah. And then all of a sudden you'll have like 30 people out of 50 coming forward saying they saw something. I'm not saying you dismiss it, but a lot of them might really not be more than anything just trying to cash in on the hype and the excitement of everything. But you don't dismiss it. you take these things into account. Now, this time period, you're obviously dealing with very logistical police. I've always been kind of the kind of guy that to think like, okay, if I'm fighting an alien, I'm fighting some cryptid entity or something, and I got the cops on the phone, the last thing you say is, hey, there is a werewolf, there is a Bigfoot or something like that. You need to lie. Like, hey, there is like a bad dude here with a gun or something or a knife, he's attacking me, and I'll get the cops out there. In this day and age, cops, in my kind of understanding, even if you did happen to slip the word Bigfoot or something like that, like, they're not going to blatantly disregard and be like, oh yeah, you're joking, it's a crime, all that kind of stuff. Like, it depends when you're speaking with the operator, because if it could happen, but someone is still going to come and check on you. There's still a degree of response where in this time period back in the 70s and 60s, it's just like, hey, there's not many cops kind of cruising around in these smaller communities. It could be like, hey, yeah, we're not going to waste our time. Oh, we're busy doing this, fighting crime and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's a different mindset is what I'm trying to get at in short. And between the two mindsets of these two time periods, it's seen evidently here like, oh, it's just a joke. We're dismissing it. Whereas now, when something happens and you're dealing with an unknown entity on your property, or it jumps in front of your car and you make this call, you will be met with a degree of realism. And I think that also is connected, in fact, with, we don't hear a lot of these things on the news. We don't hear a lot of these things put out into the general media. But it doesn't mean that these things aren't happening. So when these things happen and get reported, one individual from this part of the province or state reports it to the police. Another person reports it from another part of the province or state to the police. And this is why I kind of believe that the police and other powers do have certain loggings of these events. And I believe that's why things are a little bit more serious these days when you do call for help. And not just the police, but maybe a different organization or the right type of response will come in to engage with you and convene on what happened and try to shed light on it. And this is my own conspiracy side. Run with a grain of salt. Don't take the whole jar of salt with you. But they may try to instill, hey, it was a bear. Hey, it was this. Any evidence you have, we're just going to take that with us and we're going to hide it. So I do think that nowadays it's a very serious thing, and there's a good amount of information that is withheld on this. And that's why I like turning to these old newspaper clippings, because all these kind of things that were made public back then, not so much now. When's the last time you've seen someone post in a newspaper about a Dogman or a Bigfoot? Sure enough, I mean, it's old. it's old publicity, and those kind of encounters are limited to the wacky magazines that you see in the grocery stores of like, oh, aliens abducted my husband and all that kind of stuff. And it's unfortunate because that's spinning a narrative to make you kind of chuckle and not believe in that sort of thing. And it's quite a shame. It's really, really a shame to have it put with such unreliable media. I think that these things need to be discussed and they need to be shared, because people that experience it, they're just going to bottle it up and hide it. And whenever they pass, that information passes with them. And it's very unfortunate, very sad. But again, that is just my opinion. And without further ado, I'm going to call it there. So I hope you enjoyed. This is a couple little bit of like tales and newspaper clippings about, the Dogman. And I'm excited to look for more. I think I'm going to do another one of these maybe on like Mothman and just a few other cryptids I can find, because there's so many articles that I could find on different cryptids. But Dogman was definitely the tricky one. It's definitely a very tricky one. But anyways, you can find us on our website, CryptidClues.ca. You can send us an email, CryptidClues@gmail.com, and you can find us on our social media channels, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and you can get ad-free early episodes on our Patreon. So until next time, I'm Taylor, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everybody.